Okay, I think we're going to start. If other people arrive, we can let them in due course. So first of all, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all this afternoon here, virtually through Glasgow, with our many counterparts from across Europe. So welcome everybody here today. This is our very first ICANN live event, A Green Recovery. Now, I will say today, just so that you are all aware, that we are going to record today's session. So you might just want to be aware of that in terms of your visibility and so on and so forth. Now, over the next hour, we're going to be exploring how innovations are happening now and how they could have a long-lasting impact, helping us to repair, rebuild and redesign a greener, more sustainable post-lockdown future for our cities, communities and of course our people. So we've got two cracking speakers to hear from today, hailing from some of Europe's most innovative cities, Milan and Vienna. And actually both cities, in fact, are finalists in this year's European Capital of Innovation Awards. So big congratulations to both cities for that accolade. That's not a small nomination. So today's event is being delivered to a collaboration with our European Capital of Innovation iCapital Alumni ICANN network. That's a big mouthful, but it's a very important network. And I know that those of you who are in the room and also many other colleagues have a lot of interest in this area, and indeed knowledge exchange is probably one of the most important assets that we can bring to the table in this current digital age. Now, Glasgow, as you might imagine, is very proud in terms of its own role within ICANN. And in terms of the subject for today is entirely pertinent to what Glasgow has lying ahead in the next just over a year. So you will all know that the city will be hosting COP26 next November. The city itself has rebirthed its Sustainable Glasgow vehicle, which will be entirely responsible for looking at what the city hopes to achieve through that prior to the event itself and also as part of its legacy. You may or may not know that Glasgow already has said an ambition of net zero by 2030, which we believe is possibly one of the most ambitious city targets in the world. And indeed, the city's been doing a great deal around the circular economy, some of which has been led by the business community and through the work that the Chamber of Commerce here in the city has done with the City Council and Zero Waste Scotland and our partners in the Netherlands, the circular economy. And indeed, a circular economy route map will be getting published for Glasgow later this year. So watch this space on all of that, which is very relevant for today's subject. Now, the ICANN network and platform is powered by Glasgow City Council and the Glasgow City of Science and Innovation Network. And it basically curates new opportunities for better collaborative and innovative working between academic, public and business sectors, both here nationally and globally and across Europe in particular. And it's all about driving business innovation and supporting inclusive growth aims. Very important ambitions in this, particularly in this current day and age. And today's event is an excellent example of that. Now, the actual ICANN platform itself, it connects with 21 different European leading cities of innovation. And it connects researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, policymakers and investors worldwide to develop fresh ideas and share all this good practice to unlock the power of co-creation. And it's all about transforming policy, innovation and policy and practice around the world. So a really powerful network actually, and one that, as I say, we're very proud to be part of. Now, it's actually free to be part of and anybody can sign up. There's regular discussions. And indeed, following on from today's gathering, there will be a follow-up session and the dates of that will be confirmed in your follow-up email. So watch this space for that. And today's event is also part of an event series that happens in Scotland called Venture Fest, which is a focal point for driving a culture of innovation and business and supporting Scotland's ambition to be a world-leading, entrepreneurial and innovative society. So very much part of the heartbeat of Glasgow and indeed Scotland. And you can find out lots more about VentureFest if you go to venturefest.scot. And again, you'll have these details sent out to you after today's event. So in terms of today's etiquette and logistics, we'd really love you to engage and be proactive in this session. As I say, we're going to have our two speakers giving their contributions up front. We hope for a lively discussion. I think the preference today is that you bring your questions through the chat function, and I will do my best to bring you in where we can, or indeed group together, kind of like similar questions together, and allow you to contribute that way. So that's how we're proposing to handle the session today. So that brings me to our very first speaker this afternoon, and I'm going to introduce you to Lucia Scopoliti. And she is Head of Unit of Economic Development in the Municipality of Milan, expert at UIA, which is the Urban Innovative Actions. That's a good title, Lucia. That's a good title.
Thanks for the introduction.
Lucia will speak about the Milan of the future, which I think will be really exciting. It's a sustainable, inclusive and digitally advanced ambition. She's going to talk a little bit about how the COVID pandemic has accelerated progress to some of those ambitions that were already there in the heart of the city. And in terms of each stage of the actual crisis as well, from resilience, response and renewal. And we know that Milan has expanded its vision for a sustainable future, and it's now incorporating wider elements that are integral to the city's long-term recovery. And I won't go into those because I know that Lucia is going to do that. But I would say that the City of Milan has remained committed to innovation, which is brilliant to hear, and its goal for a sustainable and equitable future before, during and coming out of this crisis. So Lucia, I'd love to hand over to you now. Welcome.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I will try to share my screen so I can show you my presentation. All right, can you see it? Okay. I saw people nodding. So, good morning. Well, in 2019, Milan was on the rise. Milan is well known for fashion, design, culture, and it is also the economic engine of Italy. But our citizen and administration have always had bigger aspirations, and collectively we have outlined a new vision focused on three priorities: sustainability, community, and technology. For years, Milano has been working to be a fully sustainable and resilient city and to mitigate the threats of the climate change. In 2019, our municipality set a series of clear targets in order to speed up the transition through a circular economy. By 2030, we plan to plant 3 million trees across the metropolitan area to reduce our carbon emission by 45% and lower the city's temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. And by 2050, we will have turned Milan into a carbon neutral city. And in recognition of its circular economy program, Milano was invited to join the Circular Economy 100. Maybe most of you know about it, or have heard. And it's a network operated by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Well, in this journey, we are trying to co-create city-led initiative with our communities. We transformed our public spaces based on the principle of the so-called tactical urbanism, involving local communities in the restyling of the neighborhood through easy-to-implement, pop-up, scalable, special interventions. Through our program called the Open Plazas project, we created public spaces in residential areas that previously lacked them, improving safety. We strengthened our public engagement strategies to ensure Milanese to have a strong voice in the changes that are made to their city. A bold example is our new city master plan, a document that was co-created with cities actually during the pandemic, that answers more than 1,500 questions and presents 840 freshly new ideas. We are gathering and sharing best practices with our colleagues in Italy and abroad, and we belong to main international networks. One of these is the Global Resilient Cities Network that came from the 100 Resilient City Initiative. So technology is a crucial lever for us to empower our residents. So we launched a digital transformation plan focused on 4 main pillars: infrastructure and services on one side for the technology component, and digital education and digital skills for the cultural component. We prioritize the rollout of digital services, making them more accessible and easier to use. We adopted a mobile-first strategy for our digital services with our motto, mobile first, just one click. The result is the Digital Citizen Folder. It's a single point of access to certificates and the e-government services. More than 65% of certificates in 2019 were issued digitally, saving time, cost, and reducing our carbon footprint, of course. And this was made possible by the deployment of a huge interoperability plan that standardized and synchronized all of our data. And to be sure that our technology was actually inclusive, we launched a public-private program for digital education, offering in-class and virtual training to citizens. These changes laid the foundation for our new city, innovation through participation. And so indeed our achievement lies not just in the principle we chose, but in our innovation process and culture. Public engagement is a fundamental part. We support and partner with community members to identify challenges and co-design creative solutions. We partner with businesses and forge a public-private partnership to deliver meaningful change at scale across our city. And we create the condition for more than 2,100 innovative startups to make a difference in Milan. For our citizens, we create education opportunities. For example, one program is called STEM in the City and trains 15,000 youth, mainly girls, in STEM and opens their eyes to careers in tech fields. For our entrepreneurs, our social innovation incubator, Fabric, and we also launched a civic crowdfunding initiative to ensure that our entrepreneurial residents can turn their ideas into reality, also incubating circular business. For our businesses, we co-launch large infrastructure initiatives such as the 5G testbed project, so that companies can test possible use cases that may one day benefit our city and Europe, hopefully. Milano was also acknowledged as a global test bed for urban green innovation by C40's Reinventing Cities Global Competition, in which the city had 7 winning submissions in 2020. Among them is the L'Innesto project, which will be the first carbon-neutral social housing project in Italy, demonstrating that cities can simultaneously advance environmental and social impact goals. And then the pandemic. In February 2020, the COVID crisis struck, and I say crisis because it quickly evolved into our nation's biggest crisis since the Second World War. We were the first, as you know, large European cities to be hit, and we were shocked and not prepared. Nobody was. For 70 days, 10 million people and over 100,000 businesses in Milano and the surrounding Lombardy region were placed in lockdown. The most vibrant city in Italy became a deserted city. The virus was faster than our bureaucracy, and we had to act very quickly, leveraging all the tools at our disposal. The assets we developed before the pandemic were actually the engine of our response. Our digital foundations enabled us to operate across departments. We collaborated in the EU task forces, such as the Global Mayor COVID-19 Recovery Task Force launched by C40. And we had a strong culture of collaboration with the private and academic sectors. We had organized the information stream and sources to make real-time data-driven decisions with a program called Unlock, together with the Polytechnic of Milan. We shifted from shock to action, but we knew we weren't able to respond to this challenge alone. We assembled a strategy to engage other stakeholders. We developed a digital ecosystem to map, analyze, cooperate with third parties, and intervene in emergency-related matters. We called it Milano Aiuta, Milano Helps, and it managed during the lockdown more than 40,000 requests. We couldn't have faced the pandemic without the dedication of our frontline workers, volunteers, and companies, and we delivered weekly food to 6,400 families in need and 2.7 million pieces of personal protective equipment. Even during lockdown, life must go on and services need to be available for citizens. So we kept our offices open for critical services, but the majority of our citizens opted for digital services spontaneously, and the adoption rate of digital certificates peaked at 85% and has been stable since then. This picture shows on the right the first wedding we celebrated in Milan after the lockdown. It's a reminder that technology is a lever and not a goal, of course, and thanks to our digital services, this couple was able to fast track the procedure and get pre-wedding certificate online. Our capacity lies in having understood that the COVID pandemic provided us an opportunity to change a course. Instead of returning to normal, we launched Milano 2020, a strategic plan to reopen the city and fast track our goals. Milano 2020 was an open document that all citizens can contribute to. We received almost 3,000 proposals from citizens. These ideas included the launch of Strade Aperte, Open Street, which is an evolution of Open Plazas, which I just mentioned. And Open Streets is a scheme to reduce car use and reallocate street space to cycling and walking to facilitate social distancing measures, including the introduction of more than 35 kilometers of new bike lanes. We adopted our public spaces to ensure businesses could reopen safely and granted almost 2,200 open space concessions for free. Now we look forward. We are energized for the future and committed to our principles and committed to our approach to innovation with underpinned the success that we believe we had in this context. The pandemic provided once again that people are the real engine of innovation and that a restart should not be built keeping in mind our previous organizational and evolutionary models. Mario Draghi recently spoke on the reform of European rules based on ethics and cohesion. Mariana Mazzucato, she's a very famous public economist at UCL, gave several interviews during the lockdown talking about the importance of public purpose in PPPs. And there is also a lot of talk about the role of the fourth sector and purpose-based economics and impact finance. So in short, a reconstruction tout court is not expected, but a reconstruction on new foundations, we really hope so. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Lucia. Well, my goodness, that's a lot of content you've covered there. And yes, indeed, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation does indeed have you as a circular city. So there's perhaps more we can talk about there in due course, certainly from Glasgow's perspective. You talked about inclusive digital technology, mobile innovation through participation, data-driven restart, digital mapping, and I think that's very much the order of the day at the moment. Everybody's talking about digital remodeling and how does that affect their own business or their massive stakeholder organisation. And the fast tracking of engagement, but above all, as you said towards the end, that people are the engine of innovation ultimately. So many thanks indeed to you for that. So I would ask that people, once you've started to reflect on what Lucia has been saying, if you could start to put your questions in the chat function, please. And then I'm going to bring in our second speaker, please, this afternoon, and that is Michaela Cower, and she represents Vienna in the Executive Committee of Eurocities, and she works closely with the Committee of the Regions. She served as a coordinator of the EU Urban Partnership on Affordable Housing from 2015 to 2018. She's going to discuss the Vienna 2030 strategy, and that's a long-term development plan until 2050. And they are implementing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in doing so. Now, the priorities of this particular strategy have well-being for all at its heart, and I think well-being and circular economy are two phenomena that we hear a lot about now, but also an inclusive and sustainable recovery following this COVID crisis. So I'd like to introduce and warmly welcome Michaela to join us now, please.
Yes, good afternoon to everybody all over Europe, I think. People from everywhere. I will try to share my presentation with you. Voila. Should work, I hope. I hope it works. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to be here today to discuss a bit about how Vienna did it in times of COVID-19. And I think that one can say that in a way, we have been well prepared. Nobody can be prepared for such a pandemic, of course, but we have been well prepared to react swiftly to what we saw coming. And I'm very sorry, but when we saw what was going on in Italy, Lucia, I look at you, this was already the first warning that something was coming up. So we had a little bit more time to react and to prepare ourselves. I think that preparing yourself for a pandemic or any other kind of crisis is something that has to do a lot with governance, and I will come back to that during my short intervention. I think we should talk about the way also sometimes political reactions to the corona crisis have been very much put into conflict areas because of lack of good government relations between different levels of government. I think also, and my last point will be a little bit about the way we try to propose and engage on European level, because I think that also the answer of the European Union especially has to do to react to COVID and to cope with the crisis, and how cities' role is seen and perceived by the European institutions is an important point. So I'll just, most of you will know that we are Vienna, the capital city of Austria. We're proud to be a very green city, and in fact, I must honestly say that this has been fortunate during the corona crisis, as we've seen that a lot of people were also in lockdown in Vienna since the 16th of March, and it was important for our population, for our citizens, to be able to get some basic fresh air, green space, even if playgrounds were closed for security and safety reasons. I mean, people were out in the parks, we're out in the streets, we're out in our forests, which we also have on the ground of Vienna. So I think having a good green infrastructure in a city is already one part of the solution or of the relief you can give to your citizens. What we have seen in Vienna, you don't have to read it, but we were really also seeing that a lot of our services, like Lucia mentioned, they adapted quite swiftly, be it with digital services, be it with improved also helplines. We had a 24-hour helpline for everybody in the city in all the languages of our population. We think that this is also something where one has to be a little bit more precise. It doesn't make sense to only do it in German when people are especially in a health crisis. They will not understand if you don't talk to them in their mother language, in their native language. I think that was also vital in the information and communication. We have obviously also seen economic recession coming up and problems in our local economy. But one of the issues I want to highlight is that we had very strong public companies already way before the crisis, and we have always upheld a strong municipal sector, be it energy, waste, water management, transport. All this has been really in the first line of defense, I must say, to provide maximum safety and continuity of services for all our citizens. Strong public services are part of a resilient economic and governance model. This is something we would like to share from Vienna with all others around the globe, I must say. What we have also seen, and Vienna is known for that quite well, housing. Housing obviously is at the heart of the crisis, and we have started we have stopped any eviction in our own municipal apartments, which already make up 220,000 flats in a city with 800,000 flats. Our cooperative sector followed this example immediately, and they cover more than 200,000 flats as well. And the national government, who is in principle also responsible for the private rental sector, also took measures to protect people from evictions due to non-payment of, for instance, a loss of the job and therefore limited or reduced income. So I think that this is something where you can say that a resilient city is also built on, in the sense of the word, is built on a good housing policy where people are protected, where they have indeterminate contract, where protection of tenants is a key and clear aim of the policy and of the system. And I think one of the things where we were really proud about is that even in the middle of the crisis, I mean, the crisis is not over, but in June, our mayor announced that we will build new municipal flats, 1,000 new municipal flats in the coming years, distributed all over the city area. So I think that has also a positive effect on the overall resilience in the city. When it comes to the economic situation, we see, as many other cities and countries, a severe recession coming up. We need to develop plans for that. Part of that was that from a strategic perspective, already very early, our mayor has tasked the Vienna Economic Council. This is a little bit like what Lucia said, the communication with business, academia, social partners, research, and also the innovation-related organizations we have in the city. That this council was tasked by the mayor to develop plans for recovery, for economic recovery, and I think that was important. They have met several times and started to develop also clear measures for our economy to start again, but in a more resilient way maybe than we had it. These are just a few examples what we did. I mean, most of the cities what I have been observing did very similar things. It's obvious that you want to help your own companies in the city. What we have seen is that there has been a rise, for instance, of locally based collaborative economy examples. I mean, think of all the delivery services that were needed, but also some other examples where we have started to have deliveries not only for food but for pharmaceutical things, etc. So there's a local economy that has took this as a chance, very innovative ideas. For instance, one of the last examples, it's not listed here, is that young people who had finished their education as cooks, they were not able to find jobs now, obviously, because gastronomy has been hit quite hard, as in many other places. But then they started to make a pop-up restaurant, and it's going quite well. So, and they're taking the food, they're procuring, they're taking it from local farmers in the surrounding of Vienna. So I think there's a lot of awareness that was raised during the crisis for local and sustainable creative ways to reorganize business. I think that also what Lucia and Milan mentioned, public space got a really important new role. So what we did was we had to adapt also part of our streets for more people on the bikes. We added bike lanes, pop-up bike lanes in many parts of the city. We covered some green areas with pop-up swimming pools even. I didn't find a picture, but this is something I think quite new. We are also trying to reorganize our whole the problem of heat in the city, heat islands. We are installing spray mists in the neighborhoods, so people where there is not so much green in the parts which are really densely populated with no parks or little green areas, there to find ways to provide for more quality of life and better air. In fact, I think that some of these examples are very much in line, in fact, with our smart city framework strategy, which we adopted last year and which gives our long-term vision for the future of the city. And I think it's what we managed with our smart city strategy. We kind of interwove the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals into the smart city strategy. So what we managed is that now the smart city strategy and sustainable development goals, they go hand in hand, and even they reinforce each other. Obviously, it's nothing very surprising that we are trying to develop smart technology, smart city technology for a 21st century city. We want to be a metropolis of health. We want to have digitalization in an inclusive and sustainable way. We want to have a smart local production in a big city. We want to stay a place of international encounter. I mean, obviously, we are not only one of the seats of the United Nations, one of the 2 seats of the United Nations in Europe, but we also have a lot of international and organizations in Vienna. And I think that this trying to adapt our whole system of conferences and sustainable tourism, also conference tourism, is something that I think we could really have a chat with Milan about that as well, how to organize ourselves there. And we want to stay the metropolis of culture and creativity. So I think that the COVID-19 crisis clearly showed that we have in our smart city strategy exactly identified areas that have a potential to stimulate the economy and the labor market in a sustainable way. When you think about Vienna, you will see that a lot of our the things that we have undertaken are very to the point of where citizens are involved. I think Lucia has mentioned it. When we saw that in the Corona crisis, women have been affected in a very special way, because they were not only there home working, but also homeschooling and home caring, and all the double and triple burden of working women was something where we really saw there was an issue. So what we did, for instance, is we provided especially those families where they didn't have, for instance, enough laptops. We provided them with laptops in order to be able to follow lessons at school. We also saw that the domestic violence was on the rise, a phenomenon that globally we have been observing, sadly enough. There again, we tried to really uphold all the services and even give more money to those organizations who are there to help women, helplines, and others, even in all, and that always in all the languages. When we look at all the labor market activities that we had to provide for, I think that again, putting the finger on the situation of women was very clearly something that we did. For instance, when you think about the long-term carers, that the women coming from Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, who were taking care 24 hours of our old people at home, they were stuck in Vienna during the Corona crisis, and they couldn't go back to their own families, because normally you would have like a 14-day shift and then another one would come. So this was not possible, obviously, during the pandemic. So what we did, we gave all of these women an extra bonus out of the budget of the city to be able to, you know, at least to account for their engagement and for the continuous work, because some of them were really there for more than 3 months, did not see their own family, and were taking care of one of the most vulnerable group of people we have in the city, the old ones that are most affected by COVID-19. So to make all of this sustainable, we were happy to, and this is the last word because it's always about money in the end. Our city budget was okay, was prepared for that because we could assemble some reserves in the past years, but obviously we now have to discuss, and this is something not only for the national but also for the European level, we now have to discuss how can we invest in the future when it comes to resilient, healthy, safe and inclusive cities which are also able to combat climate change. I think that securing stable public budgets will be the discussion of the coming years. On European level, this will not only involve the way how we use EU funding and financing instruments. There is, when you look at the whole package the European Union put together with regard to the reaction to COVID-19, cities are not really there. They are not really where we want them to be, as we have already highlighted, for instance, in our European network of big cities. Eurocities are also in the European Committee of the Regions. Cities and regions should be much more on the table when it comes about deciding where the money goes and what are the priorities. I think here we have something to do, and we are ready to do that together with all our partners, obviously, like Milan and others in the networks and organizations that are there to do that. But having a sustainable, trying to achieve sustainability in your city has also to do with stable finances. And we are really, really very much looking forward to discuss how the EU can contribute to more stable finances and less volatility and less financialization in our cities, because this will be the basis for the future of life and of a good quality of life in our cities. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Michaela. That was tremendous. So another really complimentary kind of presentation here with very different content. A lot of the ambition and assertion is common, but certainly some of the tools and levers are different. So again, quick reaction with digital services and actually being in a place that you're able to do digitally quick reaction. Sometimes there's entirely happen chance depending on where you were, either in a city, in a business, or in a public authority, just in terms of where the business planning and strategy for the organisation was. So clear that you were able to do that and react quickly with multi-languages. I thought that was an interesting point, just mindful of the complexities of communities and society. I think the strong public corporation company bias, I think, is really interesting, because at the end of the day, I suppose there's an ability to maneuver within that, and it does provide some degree of solidity. But mindful of, even in spite of that, I was noticing that you still said that within 3 weeks there were still big economic problems and job losses, even with a strong public sector. So that was very interesting. The housing point, I think it's really interesting, the fact that, the local government housing point and the cooperative mixed approach, same approach towards the housing commitment, and the aspiration to build new, although I did see said coming years, but not specifying quite when yet. But the protection of tenants being key for people's, health and well-being and sanity, I suppose, as well as everything else. But also the point you made about local economy and neighbourhoods. And again, we've seen a lot of that here in Glasgow as well, that really bustling local neighbourhoods in certain parts of the city, whereas areas in the city centre, as Lucia was saying, certainly during lockdown, utterly decimated and like a ghost town at the time. Some wonderful examples that you were giving there around the food and the conference tourism, and I will put a mast in the sand and say that Glasgow would be delighted to speak to Vienna and indeed Milan and that. As you'll know, that we have the SDC here, which is a globally renowned top of the leaderboard performing venue here, but also a wider conference offering here in the city. And again, lots of, I'm not going to go into which index we're top of, but there's just before the end of last year we got the world's best event hosting city badge, which was tremendous. So lots to exchange knowledge on in that, in terms of how innovation and conference tourism is going to be really important. So there are a number of questions up, so I'm actually going to go straight to the participants' questions. I've got a number of questions as well. What I'm going to do, most people have written longhand their questions, but I would like, given that the number's manageable today, I'd quite like to bring you in if you're okay. So I'm going to come to Andrew first, and then I'll go to David Blair from Wales, and then I'll bring in Glenn. So just so that you know, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to start. Andrew, you've had at least 10 seconds to get ready to come in now. So Andrew's basically asking about the impact on the circular economy for Milan specifically, and the shift to digital. But Andrew, would you like to come in and just bring your question to Lucia direct, please?
Thanks, Alison. I hope it's the right Andrew, because I noticed there was another Andrew, which...
Andrew Sterling, yeah.
That's good. Thank you, got that one. So yeah, I mean, shifting to digital means you've got the opportunity to share data and coordinate, but it might be that the physical, for example, sharing of your car or other things becomes a bit more complicated when people are cautious about where they go, who they have contact with, surfaces or environments that they don't control. So I just wondered if there were some pointers to how that might be done practically.
Well, during the the most acute phase of the pandemic, we observed very carefully how the sharing economy business was evolving. And actually, there were some services that were absolutely, decreased in terms of use. And your example about the car sharing is perfect. People didn't want to touch and put hands on the same part of the car of someone else's been before. But other services, and same things happened with the Airbnb, for example, and many others. Some other platforms appear to be, on the other hand, very useful. For example, the food delivery, they experienced a great boom, but also the municipality tried to push some through the platform that I just mentioned, Milano Helps, Milano Aiuta. We were able to provide some services online and in sharing. So in this sense, we observed this sort of evolution. Now the situation changed. So on the one hand, the companies providing sharing services such as car sharing, scooter sharing, they adapted with a number of procedures for sanitization, for quick sanitization right after use. So they took some time, but they were able to improve the quality of the services in terms of safety. And on the other end, because of the many bike lanes, for example, and other traffic limits that were imposed, the use of the car is deeply discouraged. So it's all a matter of inducing behavioral changes, but working on both sides, so working together with companies in order to be more compliant to standards, safety procedures, and quality, and on the other hand, eventually put also some constraints for the use of some assets, so for example, private cars. We think it's possible to induce some behavioral changes in this way.
Okay, thank you, Lucia.
Thank you. Oh. Mute button. Thank you. Sorry, this is a pause there in digital tech systems. That's always your worst fear when you're a host of an event at these, or a speaker indeed at these events. Andrew, I forgot to say, I should have said, would you please say where you're from when you're asking your question when I bring you in? And Andrew actually does specifically have another question for Michaela. So Andrew, would you like to just bring that in now, please?
Yes, so I can correct that now, Alison. I'm Andrew Sterling. I'm from a company, my own company called Larkhill, and we're focusing on connectivity and smart communities. We've particularly looked at some of the rural challenges, which are very notable in Scotland. But actually, I think there's huge opportunities for rural and urban to collaborate. And I think Michaela hinted at the need for green spaces by people in urban areas. And I'm actually on Arran at the moment, which is a very beautiful green space, not too far from Glasgow. But yes, so, sorry, could you remind me of the question that I was about to ask? was it, oh, hang on, I can.
I know, I can indeed. Basically, Andrew was wanting to know, in Vienna, how did you actually reach out to the women when the crisis was in its full tilt? Well, the crisis in the lockdown format that has just passed was in its full tilt, she says, diplomatically. Were there any particular channels that were especially useful for you to reach the women you referred to?
Okay. Yeah, the women. I think I'm an urban feminist. I cannot hide this. Yeah, I will always be. But I'm very proud of my city because since many years we have been putting forward women's rights on top of our agenda, and since many years we have been promoting that throughout the whole administration of the city. So it's not only about gender mainstreaming and collecting gender disaggregated data, it's about really empowerment of women. So what we did, we have obviously the basic the services for women that we have we work together with NGOs, we work together with a lot of also, and they're doing different things. Some are working with girls, which we encourage to take, for instance, to choose education in technology and mathematics and nature sciences. Some are working with migrant women, and some are working obviously also with women who are victims of male domestic violence. So we have a rich, I would say, security net for women, but we also have initiatives in the labor market and in our business company. So it's quite normal in Vienna to communicate both with men and women, and to say where are women especially affected. And we very much know about where women are working, where women are having problems in the labor market. And this is where we can address them, I think, much easier than if you do not have already such a net and such a stable relation also with civil society organizations and NGOs and women's shelter homes, etc. So I think that building up a stable feminist network to empower women and to help women when they have problems, this will also help you in a crisis situation.
Thank you. Do you fear that you miss anyone out that's not attached to one of those organizations? Is there a chance for them to find out that you exist and the help is there?
If I would be optimistic, I would say Vienna invented the word from the cradle to the grave. So we have a service for everything and for everybody normally. But obviously there will be people who are a little bit far from the information flow. And this is why for us, for instance, it's super important to support people who are in more precarious living and working conditions. What we have learned in this crisis, and it's a little bit also coming back to the question before, I think when you look at where we have the issues, it's always where we have precarious work conditions. It's where we have working conditions where people are not, they don't have safe jobs, they don't have health conditions, they are not organized with trade unions. If it's in a public company and in a public administration, you can have very safe working conditions, and you can have healthy, safe working conditions. If you're working in a postal distribution center and you're not knowing if you take a day off with sick leave that you will have the job the next day, then you're going to work even if you're sick, and then you will have these clusters in these special places, or if it's the slaughterhouses, if it's the conditions under which some people because you talked about the rural areas, where for instance you have the harvest workers, they're living in incredible bad conditions. So everywhere where you have precarious and not organized and not under some kind of public control and assistance working conditions, you will see that we will continue to have these corona clusters, and that's really, I think, something where you have to pick the point, because those are the most vulnerable people, and those you have to try to get in contact. And it's not so easy. I must admit, it's not always easy.
No, very complex issue to resolve for sure. I'm going to bring in David Blair next. So he's going to want to talk a little bit about his perspective from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and how we use products and the role that cities will have in that in terms of actually getting to net zero carbon ambitions, which I think most of us all have in some form or other, with some form of timeline deadline to that. So David, can I bring you in, and if you wouldn't mind just saying exactly who you're from, your role. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I'm David Blair. I'm part of the circular economy team at the Welsh Government in Cardiff. To put it in timeline context, we're developing a circular economy strategy for Wales for the next 10 years. We'll be publishing that strategy, fingers crossed, at the tail end of this year, having done a huge piece of engagement across 40 different community events and business events, greeting about 1,000 stakeholders in the early part of this year. That's the context in which the question comes. I think Alison has mentioned the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I'm going to sneak in a second question if I can, but if I can start with this one. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation tell us that 45% of carbon emissions actually come from the products that we make and use. So putting that in the context of a pursuit towards net zero carbon, I guess the question is, unless we manage and value resources in a different way, we won't be able to achieve our net zero carbon aims. So the question to our two presenters so far would really be, what can cities do to try and drive that change towards that 45% of emissions?
Yeah, well, of course, again, it's really about working on a matter of behavioral changes with citizens. But also I will address this challenge about working with companies, for example. So just to give you a couple of examples of what I've been doing in Milan in order to really try to do some lobbying activities with companies. So we are collaborating with the Milan Chamber of Fashion, with the Italian Chamber of Fashion, sorry, and we signed an agreement with them in order to push on sustainable fashion. The fashion industry is one of the most pollutant industry ever in the world. Data are really shocking. Some fabrics in particular, such as denim. Okay, I won't talk too much about it, but we agreed on a number of activities with the Italian Chamber of Fashion, asking them to work together with their labels, brands, and associates, which are the most representative one in Italy and also in the world, I would say, to try to negotiate with their brands in order to change their impact and start up with some sustainable project and initiatives. As a city, we launched, for example, a cultural and raising awareness initiative called the Green Carpet Awards. So we award companies that change their productive ways and productive technique in order to be circular. And these had a very good results in terms of communication, press coverage, and really, as I said, raising awareness on this matter. And this is an example, let's say, of soft power from the administration. If I will make an example of hard power, we made, the city council agreed on these waste tax exemptions for big companies that donate their food surpluses. So we created a food hub in Milan where we collect all these donations, and thanks to third sector organization, they're distributed to families that needs it. And the incentives that we gave to companies was an exemption for the waste tax, which is a municipal tax, so we do directly manage it. And just to keep it short, these are just a few examples.
Thank you very much indeed for that comprehensive answer. I'm going to go next to Glenn, who's actually from Glasgow City of Science and Innovation. So I'd like to bring Glenn in, who's going to talk a little bit about how we incentivise our citizens. So Glenn, would you like to come in, please?
Yes, absolutely. It was just a kind of more general question, but as we've seen as cities kind of emerge from the lockdown and we've seen cars, etc., come back on the roads, it was just if there was any ideas from either of the speakers over how we would incentivize citizens to, you know, continue to act sustainably, you know, going forward, you know, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years after the crisis.
I don't know if Michaela wants to start, or I can just try to provide a quick answers. I don't want to repeat myself about the behavioral changes theory, but I will make a concrete example of what I mean. Today in Italy, in Milan, school reopened. And there was this big debate about the temperature measure. So if families should measure the temperature at home before sending the kids to school, or if we need someone at the door of the schools measuring each kid, measuring the temperature of each kid. And so there were two sides. The side that said, okay, it's impossible to create these obstacles and queues in front of the school. Let's ask the parents to measure the temperature. And the other side that say, we don't trust parents at all because they are willing to leave the kids. They have to go to work and do other things. So we don't trust them. We don't really trust them. And so I believe that I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking that it's a typical example in which we do, as a policymakers, talk a lot about co-production, about bringing the final user into the service production. And then we say, okay, but at the very end, we actually don't trust them. So I was thinking about pushing a little bit the debate from are parents responsible or not, to the question why parents eventually want to not measure the temperature or just give some drugs and send the kids to school in any case. So which kind of services does these parents need? Which are the conditions under which if they have to keep their children at home, they are not able to do other things? So how the public services can address this kind of need and eventually induce some changes in the behavior of these parents, instead of saying, okay, we are going to give penalties or mistrust or all these other of debate. I'm not sure if it was very clear how I addressed the answer, but I think it gave a sense of the debate in this moment in how to keep the attention and the commitment of the citizen high, not just in the very emergency phase, but during the long run.
Thank you. I'm mindful of time. Michaela, would you like to come in very briefly on that? And then I'm going to take another couple of minutes just to wrap up. I'd just like to thank everybody for their patience.
Can you hear me? Is it okay? Good, thank you. No, I think it's a very good question. And I believe that when you're talking about sustainability in general, it's absolutely vital to involve citizens. Maybe I can put a little bit of salt in the room now, in the virtual room, because when it comes to behavioral change, I'm a little bit more skeptical than Lucia. I think that if you expect behavioral change from people, this is a very hard thing to do, because we are so used to our, the way we do things, but we have a strong force as consumers together, for instance. And when it comes to resilience in consumption, we have discussed it. I think that more awareness is not key. It's the way we produce and transport things and under which working conditions we do that. I think changing there it's also a little bit an answer to what I think David said before. The way things are produced, are packed, the way things are transported, these are the things where we should look at. And this is something where Vienna has, for instance, taken the way to do green procurement as a general line for all the things that we need. And that accounts for ecologically sound products, but also the way they are produced and the way they are transported. I think there we as cities can also have combined purchasing power if we would put our activities a little bit more together, I think. And on the other thing, I think it's also about, if you want to involve citizens, you have to rebuild confidence in some parts of the services. I think our big cities will never work without public transport. I mean, I'm not looking to Los Angeles now where everybody has a car or two, but in our European cities, the classical model is, in the meantime, it's having public transport, it's walking, don't underestimate walking. And this has been proven in the times of the crisis, that people started going back on the street and doing things where normally they would have taken the car, the bus, or the bike. They started walking. Yeah? And we have evidence on that in Vienna, that people started walking much more than ever before. And they are, I hope that they continue. We will see. But we have to rebuild, for instance, confidence in the public transport. There has been no cluster that hasn't been known in Europe that were in public transport use, you had a corona cluster. No evidence about that. So we are there also now to trying to rebuild confidence in the ways cities are organized and where mobility of people is so important. I think these are some of the aspects where we can work with citizens, but we also have to give them the confidence and the safety that it's possible.
Thank you very much, Michaela. Well, goodness, a lot of content here. I suspect we could probably go on a little bit longer, but I am mindful of time. So we're already going to run about 5 minutes over. I would like to send a very personal big thank you for both of our speakers this afternoon on behalf of Glasgow City of Science and Innovation and also the ICANN network. So thank you to Lucia and to Michaela. I always feel that we want to clap. I know we're on a screen, but we'd be sitting clapping if we were in a room. So, you know, thank you very much. We've heard some really great, inspiring innovation that's happening across, particularly these two cities. And I think we've seen how that's kind of been linked to the positive recovery as a result of this, you know, dreadful pandemic situation that we found ourselves in. And also about some of the new possibilities about how we might run our cities in the future. And I think that's possibly one of at least 2 or 3 themes that I think are likely to come out of today, which we can follow up on in the future discussion platform. So I think how we might run our cities in the future, but also how we might influence our citizens' behaviours, mindful of Michaela's observation that it is very difficult to get people to change. So we've heard a range of themes about inclusive digital, data-driven approaches. We've heard about the importance of housing, the role of public service. We've heard about local economies. And we've heard about people being the engine of innovation. Again, I think that's such an important point. And that's how I'm going to just sum that up in terms of a couple of the themes that we've heard about. But I mean, as we move forward, there will be many more innovations. I think there have been observations in the chat function here that, you know, this is the whole point of the ICANN network. It is a knowledge exchange. There's opportunities to share on an ongoing basis. And the team will share with you on the follow-up from today the ICANN platform where you can re-engage and follow up on some of this discussion content, which I think is really helpful. As you know, it's being recorded today and that will be shared also. And then in addition to that, we've got Nantes, who have got an Nantes, we're the iCapital in 2019, as you'll probably know, and they're having their innovation forum on October the 8th and 9th. And it's a digital forum, and you're welcome to join that. But that's going to be very much about exploring possible futures for shared governance, which is an interesting phenomenon in lots of different ways, and also social innovation. And they've got a couple of cracking big speakers lined up for that, including Maria Gabriel, the European Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education and Youth. That's a big lot of responsibility. You'll be able to find more on the nantesinnovationforum.fr, but you'll get that shared again following up from today. Now, if you've got any further questions, and I guess there will be many, and I can see there are more things coming through because that's the way it is when you wrap a session, please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of the team here at Glasgow City of Science and Innovation. There's Laura Bell, there's Glenn Corrigan and Helen Teeling who are on. All of them will be happy to respond to you. I'd like to say thanks to the team for making today really slick, and a very warm thank you again to Michaela and Lucia, and to each of you for giving your time up to join us here in Glasgow today. And have a great day, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you in due course. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.